It's the Masters, the season's first major, a tradition unlike any other, and a time for players to outperform even their own high expectations. This takes focus, commitment, and trusting the best golf ball for your game. That's why the majority at Augusta National will rely on the Titleist Pro V1 or Pro V1X. They deliver superior performance, consistency, and unrivaled control. Titleist, the number one ball at the Masters, the number one ball in golf.
Hello and welcome to episode 117 of The Thing About Golf, the third in our special series of interviews from on the ground at Augusta National in this 2024 Masters Week. Rod Morrie's my name, but it's my colleague John Huggan doing the heavy lifting in Georgia as he scours his contact book to line up interviews with some of the most thoughtful and interesting people in the game. We've already heard from Ben Crenshaw and Ian Baker-Finch this week, but things go up a notch today when perhaps the best-known voice in modern golf broadcasting sits down for a grilling. Brandel Chamblee doesn't shy away from controversy, and one is rarely in doubt what his opinion is on any given topic. And that makes for good listening, as you're about to hear.
Okay, welcome to the third edition of the Masters Thing About Golf podcast. My guest this time around is a face and a voice that will be very familiar to just about everybody, I think, in golf these days. Brandel Chamblee, what was and is the thing about golf for you?
The thing about golf for me is I think it's the best game that's ever been invented for spending time with family and friends, doing business, or raising money for charity.
That's simple.
That's simple. I can't think of a better way to spend time with family. I can't think of a better time to make friends, or a better way to make friends, or a better way to spend time with friends. I can't think of a better way to do business. You get to know people. I've been involved in a few different ventures around the U.S., building these gamified driving ranges over the last couple of years. Before I've done business with anybody, they've wanted to play golf. And you spend 5 hours, 6 hours with them, and you go have a bite to eat. And at the end of the day, you've talked about every detail of the business, and based upon a relationship, they get on board.
Now, I ask this question a lot every time I do this podcast, and so I've started thinking about how I would answer it. And I kind of thought that it was the best way for me to find out about me.
Yeah. That too.
You know, I learned a lot about me by playing golf.
Yeah, that too. You know, you find out how patient you are. You find out how prone to self-loathing you are.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we can all we need to all be our best friend. And you know, golf teaches you a lot about that. You know, recently there's been this, I think, this awareness of how. And look, prior to this Julie Elliott, this doctor that's been so prevalent with success here in the U.S. this year. There was, of course, scores of them, Bob Rotella and many others. Yeah. But she's had so much success, and it's because I think, and I don't know this 100%, but reading between the lines, I think she's more holistic about what she's helping these players with. It's like, you got to get your act together, get your life in order, and then you'll play good golf. You can't just go out there and...
Where do you stand on this whole psychology thing? I mean, to me, it's one of these things. It's like trade unionism or communism. That's a great idea on paper.
Yeah,
and it's a great idea for a while, and then it goes too far.
Yeah, look, I see that side of it.
Yeah.
But I think if you're blessed enough to have played your whole life with success, you're probably not prone to negative thoughts, or maybe you're just never were inclined in the first place, and that's why you've had so much success. I'm not saying that Jack Nicklaus never had negative thoughts or Tiger Woods never had negative thoughts, but I think they're just the constitution that they were blessed with made them very methodical, and if they're always in the process of thinking about what I need to do next to be in the right frame of mind to do what I need to do next, there's no room for negative thoughts to cloud in. If you're not one of those people, and I think most people aren't, you need a little help with that. I ran into a fella a while back by the name of Zig Ziglar, and he's a
name to forget.
Yeah, and he's a very well-known motivational speaker and just enormously successful. And he said that he was a big believer, like he seemed like he had everything in order. Like this guy didn't need help with anything.
Yeah.
And he goes, "Oh no, I'm a big believer in coaches. Coaches for everything. Coaches for finances,
right.
Coaches for business, coaches for mind frame, coaches for fitness."
Yeah.
And and he was like, they help you organize your time and keep you focused. And so, as much as I love the dig it out of your dirt, do it on your own stories, and I do, those are Ben Hogan, Elite Trevino, and the like, they're exceptional people who've dealt with a lot of hardship in their life and came through it tougher.
Yeah. Where do you sit in your two lives, if you think? You were the tour player, a good tour player, but not an exceptional tour player. And you're now, it would seem to me, you're at a higher level as a broadcaster than you were as a player. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No doubt.
And how has your psyche been different, or is it different within those two roles?
Yeah, I feel
given
like
the level that you're at in both of them.
I gave professional golf everything I had. I'm blessed with a nice work ethic, and I gave it everything I had. And I feel like I had a nice career. I think you described it perfectly. It was a nice enough career. I played 15 years at the highest level. I got to 57th in the world.
People forget how good you have to be just to get on the tour. This journeyman label is always very unfair, I think, because they're a hell of a player if you're on the tour.
If you're on the tour, there's roughly 10,000 players around the globe trying to play at the highest level, and if you get on the tour, you're the elite of the elite. And of course, there's subsets of that. But I feel quite comfortable with my career. I think I defend it nice enough. But the TV world, I think for one thing, if you've struggled in golf, you've spent a lot of time thinking about the game. If you're analytical, and I am by nature, people who the game comes to pretty easily. There was a great writer by the name of David Foster Wallace. I don't know if you ever read him, but he's a terrific writer.
I know who he is, but
he's brilliant. He passed away. He's no longer with us, but he wrote a wonderful essay about Tracy Austin's autobiography, where he excoriated the autobiography, said it was just nothing but banalities and platitudes all the way through it. But at the end, he had this sort of summation of the essay and of superstar athletes, and that none of them can describe what they do because they never had to think about it critically. And he said, and that is their gift. Mm. So when you're asking Jack Nicklaus how he got into the state he got into, or Brad Faxon how he putts, or Ben Crenshaw how he putts, Brad may come close to telling you, but Brad will tell you that
he can tell you how he feels.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Not really.
Yeah.
Most people, and I mean this in a positive way, they come away disappointed. They're like, that's it? Mm. Ben will say, I just took the putter back and tried to drop it on the ball and let it go to sleep back there. Well, everybody in the world would have tried that, and it doesn't work. So his whole point was, David Foster Wallace, was they can't explain it because they never had to think about it. Back to the point of commentating, if you struggled in the game and you did think about it a lot and spent a lot of time trying to understand it, it may not have helped you be the best golfer you could be, but it helps you communicate it to others, which is my role now.
I wanted to get into your career a little bit, but the thing, because where we are this week, we're at Augusta, the thing that kind of jumped out at me was you're a man who led the Masters after one round and then never got back.
I know it.
I mean, how do you do that?
Yeah. Well, it's funny that week I played a practice round with a fellow by the name of Glenn Day, and Glenn was great friends with Jack Nicklaus, still is. I just played in Jack Nicklaus's Pro-Am a month or so ago through the invitation from Glenn, and it was wonderful. But Glenn had taken the Augusta National Yardage book into Jack and said, Jack, take me through every hole and every hole location.
Right.
So Glenn and I were playing somewhere, and he said, can you believe Jack did this? And I said, no. I said, but can you believe that you're playing a practice round with me on Monday and Tuesday of Masters Week? Mm. So we went through every hole location. So I felt like I got decades and decades of information on how to play. Like, I'll give you an example. Pins sort of back left on 6.
Okay.
And Jack said, you got to use that slope to the right. So hit a fade into that slope. It'll feed off that slope, and it'll get back there. Well, in round 1, 1999, that's where the pin was. I hit a fade into that slope. It hit that slope, and it stopped an inch away from the hole. On hole 1, pins left, you hit it 20 feet right, hit a soft fade into that slope, obviously, and you work your way around the course. So I felt like I knew this golf course after a couple of practice rounds as well as somebody who played it for 20 years. Yeah. So shot 69 the first day. I didn't even think I played that well. It was a decent round. I got in and nobody shot lower. And then on Saturday I hit a bad shot into the left trees at 8, made double. Ended up the last hole, it was blowing about, the last day it blew like 30. And I was playing with Craig Stadler. And I hit driver sand wedge to 18, but the pin was front right. Wow. And I went all the way to the back. Yeah. And I lagged it down about 2 feet. And as I was standing over it, Gus hit me, and I fell forward, and I missed it. And I ended up shooting 72. The lowest score that day was 70. And we were walking off the green, and Craig said, that was a great round for 2 reasons. One, it was windy as hell, and 2, you had to play with me. It's funny. That putt I would have been 11th. 11th would have got me in because that was the year they went from 24th. Yeah. Real quick, funny story to that. Because it was the year, every other year was if you finished in the top 24, you got in. I finished 18th. The USA Today on Monday had a list of the players that received an invitation back the next year. My name was included. So was the fellow I played with in the first couple of rounds, Bill Glasson. Right. I knew it was an error, but Bill didn't. So now we go fast forward to the next year, and Bill comes up to me and he goes, "Hey, have you made your reservations for the Masters yet?" And I said, "No." I said, "I'm not in the Masters." He goes, "What do you mean you're not in the Masters? You're in the Masters." I said, "No, I'm not." Yeah. And he goes, "Well, you tied with me." And I said, "Bill, I don't know how to break this to you.
You're not playing.
You're not in it."
Yeah.
So anyway, it was a wonderful week, but one shot too many, unfortunately.
Yeah. Again, is it the religious experience that people sometimes make it out to be to play in this thing?
It is. 100% it is. There's no course. Look, there's St. Andrews, and that lives alone. Like, it's in its own category. In the same way St. Andrews is in its own category, so is Augusta National. It's in its own category. There's no place as perfect as this. Yeah. Panoramically, from a botanical aspect, there's just no place that touches this. Nothing like it. Yeah. And it's got 2 of the most perfect holes in the history of golf, 12 and 13. Yeah. They don't get any better than that.
13 especially. Yeah.
13 was the first hole they put here. Yeah. It was the first hole they found here. It's every bit as good now as it was 90 years ago.
Now, Ian Baker Finch did this podcast yesterday, and this is something that I got into with a little bit with him. You used the word perfect there a minute ago. Uh-huh. I kind of rebel against that. I'm not sure that golf courses should be perfect.
Yeah.
Especially at the level of play we're talking about, because I know that a guy that played as well as you did, for example, you can hit a nice shot off a perfect lie.
Yeah.
But how are you if it's in a little hole or it's, whatever, it's not quite perfect? That's what I want to see. That's when we find out how good you are.
Yeah, look.
The game loses a little bit of randomness.
It does, because there's an artistic element to the game. And can you call art perfect? Is the Mona Lisa perfect? Is the Statue of David perfect? Yeah. I'm sure there are loads of people that can find fault with it, but it's just in the eye of the beholder. To me, I can't imagine there being a prettier hole anywhere in the world or more beautiful hole from a strategic standpoint than 13.
Would it be better with the occasional divot hole in the fairway?
I'm not opposed to that. I'm not one of those people that think you should be allowed to move the ball out of a divot.
No, nor me.
Yeah, I don't think you should. I think you should have to deal with all the imperfections on a golf course.
But that gets lost if it's perfect. Yeah. It's immaculate is the word that's always used.
That's true. But
but they take it to an nth degree here in almost every way.
They do. But okay, but I'll just say this. Is there not room for that element in golf, because the other side of it is so prevalent? You go play links golf, nothing about it's perfect. No. Rough edges, bad bounces, bad breaks, all over the place. Mm-hmm. So that you have to deal with the adversity. So can't we have the other side of it?
Yeah, once a year.
The flip side of the coin.
Yeah. It's like the old argument about the U.S. Open.
Yeah.
The traditional U.S. Open, was torture. I think
it was. Yeah.
I hated that kind of golf because
of course.
And we talked about this is the perfect example of the exciting recovery shot is really always in play. Yeah. So you get numbers from 3 to 8 depending on the success or failure of that recovery shot. But if you eliminate that, you guys make 4 or 5 every time.
Yes.
Because you pitch it out and you pitch it on the green and you either hole the putt or not.
Hey, listen, you and I think we agree, but we would probably, and you and I would differ a little bit on that. So, and I think you know this. I'm a huge fan of St. Andrews and links style golf and the type of golf that inspired this place, which is links golf. But on the flip side of it, once a year, what I loved about the U.S. Open was it did hold you accountable for every single shot, and it was meant to intimidate you. It's not links golf. The U.S. does one thing well. We do parkland golf courses well. We don't have links land like y'all do. Maybe Long Island, if you want to say there's some links golf up there. But we do parkland golf courses here.
Yeah.
And by and large, that's not links golf. It's not the same concept.
See, I'm a romantic in the sense that I want the game to be an art and not a science.
Yeah.
And it's too much the other way for me a lot of the time now.
It is, but the thing I love about what the U.S. Open used to be was it was draconian. It was intimidating. It was find the fairway, or even though it's not pitching out, because there's plenty of people that made great recoveries, but that's why Hogan was Hogan. The mystique of Hogan is it not embedded in dominating the U.S. Open when it was at its most draconian.
But then you get the situation in Olympic in '55 when he lost to Jack Fleck. I mean, and he hacked his way up the last hole. It took 7 or whatever it was. Because he hit it in the rough, and
he did, which gives us one of the greatest underdog success stories of all time.
Which I like as well, of course.
We still talk about Jack Fleck, and if he hadn't played Hogan clubs, would he have won that? Because Hogan wouldn't have been as nice to him. Yeah. So it's part of the lore of the game. But I'm with you. This is where people, Michael Clayton and Jeff Shackelford. I don't know Michael, but I certainly enjoy debating.
He's one of my closest friends. Yeah. You would love to sit down and talk to him, and he would be the same.
Nobilo loves him. So if Nobilo loves him, I love him. I don't know him. But he teased – I just back and forth on Twitter, I tease him about taking all the trees down. But I love that golf. To get me for 99.99999% of the people in the world, but once a year. Yeah. Just once a year. That's all I really want. Yeah. Is the best players to have to pay for hitting a poor shot. The rest of the year at the U.S. Open, at the Open, at Augusta, they get the recoveries. They get the angles.
And to this place's credit, I mean, the range of winners here is all over the map.
It's all over the map.
Which is, I think, is a great thing.
It's all over the map. From Jack Nicklaus to Phil Mickelson, you have every spectrum of golfer.
But is there a type of player best suited to this place?
Yeah, absolutely.
Describe him.
He's an upright swinger who hits cuts, because you've got to hit cuts off all these hook lies out here. You've got 14 approach shots out here, and 8 to 9 of them, the ball is above your feet, depending upon where you're at in the fairway. That's a hook lie. Yeah. And if you can't cut it off a hook lie, you can't play this place.
Just got to hang on to it a little.
So that's Jack. So Jack's release was chicken wing with the left elbow, holds off the race. That's exactly what Jordan Spieth does. It's exactly what Scotty Scheffler does. Tiger Woods could hit them all, but he was very comfortable hitting cuts. Yeah. So it's, this place, but you're right. On the one hand, you've got Seve. On the other, you've got Jack. You got Seve and Phil and Watson, so you've got the scramblers. But what all of them were capable of doing was hitting terrific iron shots and scrambling. Some of them hit it wild, some of them hit it straight. But this golf course is exciting because it tempts everybody into taking chances. Yeah. It's a great stage.
I've asked this question. I said to Ben on Monday when we did this podcast, I've asked the same question of him and Ian Baker Finch, and now I'm going to ask you. I did a piece last week for Golf Digest about Maurice Bembridge.
Yeah.
Very short-hitting little guy. Yeah. 50 years ago this week, he shot 64 in the last round of the Masters.
Is that right? 50 years ago this week, so 1974.
Yeah, and thank goodness I talked to him just before Christmas, which is, thank goodness I did, because he passed away last month, sadly. Anyway, my point is, or my question to you is, or I'll put it to you, is that the Maurice Bembridge equivalent of today couldn't shoot 64 around here. It's too long for that player now. Well, and that to me diminishes a little bit.
Well, I would just say it's relative. So if we went back, I'll bet you if we went back and we looked at where Maurice Bembridge hit the golf ball, I'll bet you relative to the field, he would have been in the lower ranks, right?
Oh, absolutely. Okay. No question.
He would have been lower ranked. Yeah. He would have been,
he'd have been in the bottom 10% for distance. Yeah.
Okay, bottom 10%.
Lovely player. But
right where Zach Johnson would have been, right where Mike Weir would have been, right where Jose Maria Olazabal would have been. So Jose Maria, if you go back and look, when he won here in 1999, by the way, I played the first 2 rounds with him, I think he averaged 229 yards off of the tee. Yeah. So, he had some tee shots that hit some trees.
He's a terrible driver relative to his competition, though. I mean, you're picking on the wrong guy there a little bit.
Yeah. And so if you look back at the last 10 years here, which I always use because I could go back as far as you want, but the last 10 years, because it's like, okay, let me just take a snapshot of the most recent 10 April Masters. I don't count the November Masters because the course played completely different. But the last 10 April Masters, driving distance has been the least important asset here.
Yeah.
It's believe it or not.
You say that? I think that was fascinating.
Yeah, the least.
That's to the course's credit again. I think.
I think so. I think so. And you go down the list and you look like Tiger when he won here in 2019 drove it awful. He drove it short and crooked, but his iron play was sublime. So, iron play, scrambling, driving accuracy, driving distance. That's the order. The last 10 years. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing about this course. To your point a minute ago, it rewards every kind of player, and it lets them play. It lets them show off.
Yeah,
it does let the best players in the world show off.
Yeah, I mean, the best places always do. I mean, I talk about this a lot. Watching Tiger, you probably did as well. The last President's Cup at Royal Melbourne.
Yeah, he was unbelievable.
Just separated himself by a mile from everybody else, by an absolute mile. Yeah. And it was an education to watch really on that golf course.
Yeah, it was. I think that was one of the finest performances I think we've ever seen, because he was also the captain that week. Yeah. And he just came out there and schooled everybody. I wish we had more courses like that in this country. We just don't. We just don't. We do parkland golf courses. That's what we mostly have in this country. Occasionally we'll go play a Shinnecock. But, I mean, where else did we play any links?
Screw it up.
Where else did we play anything that remotely looks like links in this country?
Yeah.
I mean, we don't go to Cypress Point anymore. But
no, it's too well. They're going to Walker Cup there. I worry for that place, even in a Walker Cup, because they'll be driving everything.
Yeah, but that place, they will. But everybody thought that they would beat Seminole up in the Walker Cup.
Yeah, that's true.
And they didn't.
Yeah, mind you, the greens. They got a bit. They crossed the line a little bit there.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is I think greens just get too fast. Yeah. They're just too fast. Yeah. We're so obsessed over here with greens that are 13 on the stimp meter. Yeah. 10's fine. Then you can Then you can have a more interesting hole location.
Yeah, well, that's definitely they've had to. I'm sure the motivation is to keep the scores up here.
Yes, I don't know why we're so obsessed with keeping scores up. It's either look, I go back and forth on this. I'll concede 13 doesn't bother me as much as 2 does. Watching guys drive it down 100 yards past that bunker on 2 in the last 5 years has started to upset me. Yeah, it really has. Yeah. So the rollback movement, which I've been opposed to because golf's healthy and I like watching these guys hit it 9 miles, I'm okay with it now. I listened to the RNA and the USGA, they're going to roll back. I'm like, okay, I hope you're right. I hope it makes for more compelling golf. And if that's true, let's just carry on. Let's keep at it. Because if you're going to roll it back, let's not mess around. Let's roll it back. Let's roll it back 30, 40 yards. If you're going to roll it back.
They've nibbled at the edges with what they've proposed. Yeah. That's almost pointless.
Because, look, if you really do believe it's going to lead to more compelling golf, I've had my say. They're going to go another way. Fine. I want to see it now. Now roll it back. Get after it. I really do want to see if it will make for more compelling golf. Yeah. Because...
Well, you and I have talked, God knows, often enough about this. I feel more strongly about the fact that it doesn't go sideways enough, the ball.
Agreed.
More than... I get upset about how far it goes, but not nearly as much as I get upset about how it doesn't.
Agreed. You used to, when I was growing up, you were growing up, I think we're similar ages. I may have you by a few, but I would see 3 duck hooks a day. And some big old slices. Shot anymore. Nobody hits a duck hook anymore.
No.
They hit a 30-yard hook or something, but a duck hook was off the planet.
Again, that gets back to my artistic thing. Yeah. That's been lost more than anything.
Yeah.
The game at the top
duck hooks and flyers.
It's far more one-dimensional than it's ever been.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Duck hooks and flyers are pretty much gone. Yeah. But what we do have now, though, is an epidemic of crappy chippers. So we may not have the duck hooks, but we do have, even on tour, an epidemic of terrible chippers.
That's another thing I've batted on about for years, is that nobody pays much attention to the chipping yips. But putting yips gets... Everybody talks about that.
Yeah.
But I could name you half a dozen guys who've disappeared because they couldn't chip.
Me too.
David Guilford is the one that first comes to mind.
Brett
terrific player. Yeah, there you go.
Graham Dillette.
Yeah.
Tiger, I thought would shuffle off into it. Yeah. That's it. He's over. Well, right. I was very happy that I always said I hope he does overcome them. I hope he proves me wrong, but I've never seen anybody overcome them.
But it's a very common thing.
See, when I was playing the tour, the fairways were, I don't know, a quarter an inch cut. I don't know exactly what the parameters were, but you had wiggle room under the ball.
Yeah.
Now the fairways are cut like putting greens used to be.
Yeah.
You don't have any wiggle room.
Comfort level there.
So there's no coming in kind of steep and getting a little give under the ball. You've got to be very precise.
Yeah.
And so you see players like a Victor Hovland or a Colin Morikawa come along who are just not inclined, don't have the gift. They used to be able to get away with it, and maybe they chipped it 8 feet instead of 2, like Seve.
The upside for them, though, is that they only have to be average. If they can reach average,
they just have to be average.
So
that's right. They can just get to average. Just get to where you're. I mean, it's nothing new. Y'all had a player over there who I knew of by the name of Dave Thomas, who famously had the yips.
Terrible.
And it's one of my favorite stories. Is Dave was telling me, because his son was my buddy, but Dave was telling me one time that he was playing in the Ryder Cup 1967 in Houston with Peter Alice. With Peter Alice, they were playing Arnold Palmer, and it wasn't Jack, because Jack wasn't on that team, but it was Arnold and I can't remember who else. And they had worked it out, Dave, where Peter would always be hitting Dave would always be hitting the second shots into par 5.
Yeah.
So that Peter would always be pitching.
Yeah.
And they had laid up, and Peter hooked a wedge, and it hit a bank and ended up left of the green. And he looked crestfallen and said to Dave, "I'm so sorry." And Dave went over there, and he was on hard pan, and he had to go for a bunker. And Dave was a big old barrel-chested guy, big as this table, and swung, and he could hit it 300 yards. And he swung as hard as he could and hit like 6 inches behind it, and this whole bed of turf flew up, landed on the green, and the ball just rolled off of it like a foot from a hole. And Peter Alice looked at him and he goes, "It's the bravest shot I've ever seen in my life."
Yeah, I'll bet. Yeah, Peter Alice he told me a story, but he got the yips here.
Oh,
that was on the 11th green. I think it was Gene Littler he was playing with, and after about the 5th putt,
he got the putting.
Gene Littler said, "What the F are you doing?" Peter Alice goes, "I've no idea." And that's where it started.
It hit him right here,
yeah,
on the 11th hole.
That's his story.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Well, sooner or later it comes for us all.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm jumping around a little bit here, but I'm interested in the transition of Brandel tour player to Brandel broadcaster. What was the motivation there, or was it forced upon you? I mean,
no, not really. I really wasn't playing that poorly, and I wasn't injured. But I got asked to come. This is the anniversary, actually. I got asked to come do the 2001. Tiger was going for 4 in a row, and would I come to the Golf Channel and work all week long? And I liked it. I enjoyed it. I've always loved the history of the game and studying the game, and I enjoyed it. And they just kept asking and asking and asking, and the next thing you know, I was doing it. And the evolution of the, I think it takes a while to get comfortable at it. I remember when I first started, Mike Tirico said something along the lines of, he goes, it takes about 10 years to get comfortable.
Well, the little bit I've been on 2 or 3 times and talking, and I get unbelievably nervous. Far more than I do doing anything else that I do in this job.
Which is crazy, right? Yeah. There's a famous line where I think it was Abraham Lincoln had written a letter to a relative, and he said, "Sorry about the long letter. If I'd have had more time, I'd have made it shorter."
Yeah.
And
that's Tom Callahan, one of the best writers I know, said to me once. He said, I didn't have time to write it short.
Yeah, there you go.
Thing.
Same thing. So in TV, and live TV is completely different from my job. Most of the time I'm doing pre- and post-game shows where we can talk extensively and broadly about all the topics. But live TV, if you're calling it, you're a caption writer.
Yeah.
And, how can you be as concise as you can? You have to think in 5, 6, 7 word, punctuations. And that's it, which is a challenge. But most of those people grew up in radio, where they, most of the greats from Great Britain, Scotland, they grew up in radio, where they had to describe in great detail what was happening because people couldn't see it. And they just became so marvelous at details and being able to just...
Although, my favourite piece of commentary ever was Henry Longhurst Brian Barnes was playing the Open at St Andrews, and he was short left of the road hole, and he had to putt round the back and round the bunker. The pin was behind the bunker, and Longhurst sets it up. He says, well, if he's not too careful, he very well may putt into the bunker. Silence. Barnes duly hits the putt, and sure enough, it goes up and falls into the bunker. There's a few more seconds of silence, and all Longhurst ever said was, well, there we are.
That's brilliant.
He said everything just with 5 words.
Well, he also said, and I know you know this, but we could have a little love affair with Henry Longhurst when Doug Sanders missed the putt on the 18th green. There but for the grace of God. Now, he didn't even finish it.
No.
So what is that? There but for the grace of God.
Yeah.
7 words.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all he said.
I know.
And here, famously in 75, Longhurst was on the 16th calling the golf, and Nicklaus made the putt up the hill.
Yeah.
And Weiskopf had just eagled.
Yeah,
50.
and he's standing on the tee watching this.
So you know this, and the camera goes back. It just wafts back to Weiskopf.
It's like the blood had drained from
That's
his
right.
eyes. Yeah.
And Longhurst said, and he must now take it like he dished it out.
Yeah.
And it's like, come on.
Yeah.
You can't be that.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
can't be that good.
Yeah, yeah. Well, he spoke like he wrote, which is a very difficult thing to do.
Yeah, you can't be that good. Exactly, it is. And then we don't have a Longhurst, but we've got our share of wonderful broadcasters over here. Vern Lundquist is 40 years this year. He's the one who famously had the maybe, yes sir, and that was 1986, and then of course In Your Life. Have you ever seen anything like that?
Yeah.
My wife, who's a golf nut and also a historian, and she knows I geek out on it. But when I asked her to marry me, she said to me, now, you never ask that question unless you know the answer, right? You know you're going to get a yes.
Yeah.
Okay? So we're out, nice dinner, sitting there, and, we've been dating for 6 years. So, because when we met, I'm never getting married again.
You were slow playing.
I was 100% slow playing. So anyway, I asked her, and she goes, maybe. And it hangs for like 3 seconds, and I'm crestfallen. I'm like, what? I'm thinking in my mind. I'm like, I thought this was. She goes, maybe. Yes, sir. And I was like, oh, good gracious, you had me.
Excellent.
I was like,
you didn't see it coming. Yeah.
I did not see it coming.
Yeah.
I did not see it coming.
Yeah.
And but she's silly like that and fun like that. And I was like, okay, you got me. We ran into Vern Lundquist the other night having dinner here because we mostly always go to Luigi's because it's one of the few places that's open this late. We ran into Vern, and Vern was the broadcaster in Dallas where I grew up. Right. So I've known Vern forever. Anyway, I told him that story, and he's so sweet. He lit up and laughed. He laughed for like 5 minutes, but he's a sweetheart. Yeah, golf's blessed with some of those voices.
It's the Masters, the season's first major, a tradition unlike any other, and a time for players to outperform even their own high expectations. This takes focus, commitment, and trusting the best golf ball for your game. That's why the majority at Augusta National will rely on the Titleist Pro V1 or Pro V1X. They deliver superior performance, consistency, and unrivaled control. Titleist, the #1 ball at the Masters, the #1 ball in golf.
I wanted to ask you a bit about, I know you're big in the stats, the numbers. You do a lot of research and that kind of thing. And I'm no expert on numbers. I mean, maths was never my thing at school. But I kind of question a little bit not every you go into averages, which you have to do to kind of illustrate points.
Yeah.
Some of the time. But anyway, it seems to me that not every golf shot is equal.
Yeah.
And what stats correct me if I'm wrong here, you probably take it further than I can, but I want to know how good these guys are on the shots that really matter.
100%.
But you have to,
100%.
How do you identify them within all the mass of the,
great question. Yeah. So I would say, look, stats are not the story. They lead you to the story.
Yeah.
I only use stats to lead me to the story. After I do all my research, and I will spend hour upon hour putting numbers down on a page, but then I always stop and go, all right, what are they telling me? And then I try to get at the why. Why is somebody hitting more fairways or more greens? So, yeah, of course shots are not equal. I also try to look at, because golf doesn't have this, but other sports kind of have it, but golf doesn't have Is somebody better than or worse than their stats when they're within 5 shots of the lead or 3 shots of the lead or on the back 9?
That'd be one way.
Are they better than or worse than? So I try to keep that statistic. I go back and I keep my notes, and I'm like, here he is within 5 shots of the lead. And I have other data where I can pull that up. He's in 5th place going into the last round. Is he better or worse than the person who got to 5th place? And so I absolutely spend a lot of time looking at that. And all shots are not equal. They give you an average is. I'm not a huge fan of averages. Sometimes we have to do it. I always tease. I'm like, if you're out walking your dog, on average you have 3 legs. You and your dog. Does that describe who you are? If you're taking a walk with your wife, on average, each of you have 1 testicle. Does that describe either of you?
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of averages. They suffice sometimes to get a point across, but means are better than averages. What's the middle of the road? When I look at Tiger Woods and his scoring average, I do look at what's the average tour player shooting. What's Tiger Woods shooting?
Yeah, and another question I had on stats, which I haven't asked you before, I don't think, but I get the fact that you can apply them to the top players because they're so consistent and they repeat enough that it can make sense. But for the average guy who's all over the map and hits his 7-iron a different distance every time he uses it, does it mean anything? I mean, can you come to any conclusion?
You're talking about a recreational golfer or the average tour player?
No, a recreational golfer, an amateur, a punter.
Yeah, look.
I mean, does it mean anything to them? And we get into the distance thing. How can they know how much they're going to lose if they've no idea how far they're going to hit it in the first place?
All those things are true, but golf is unlike most sports in that most sports people don't play them. People don't play football over here. People don't play baseball after 18 years old. People don't play basketball over here. Mm-hmm. They may play a little bit of tennis, but everybody plays golf. Mm-hmm. People don't just watch golf to be entertained. They watch it to try to get better. So the average golfer is always comparing himself to the tour player. Mm-hmm. And like, well, that's what they do. I'd like to do that. I'd like to try to do that.
I get that, but they don't.
It's futile.
The average golfer's terrible.
No, they are. They are terrible. They 100% are. But I think people enjoy knowing exactly how good these people are. And so when you're on the air for hours and hours.
I'm not disputing the use of all the numbers for the tour pros. That makes perfect sense. But for the average, I mean, no, you have no idea what
you don't. But the quickest way for the average player to get better is to swing faster. So if the average player went into wherever, and I mean the quickest way, not to improve his pitching or his chipping or his putting, that is wrong. Couldn't be more inaccurate. No numbers point to that. Yeah, the quickest way to improve your golf game is to swing faster. Yeah. And you can swing faster. You can pick up 5 miles an hour clubhead speed. The average player can pick up 5 miles an hour clubhead speed much, much easier than they think they can.
But this is probably something that most people don't want to hear. But, and I tell this against myself because I was the instruction guy in Golf Digest for 8 years. I churned out all the how to play better stories. Yeah. I was ghosting it for other people, but that's by the by. But when I arrived in 1988, the average handicap of the average reader of Golf Digest was 17.8. And I'm very proud to say that when I left 8 years later, it was 17.8. And every year we'd cured the slice and we'd given them 20 more yards off the tee and we'd eliminated 3 putts and we'd got them up and down every time. And it was still 17.8. So my point is, is it a battle even worth fighting? I know
that's true. I've read that, I've heard that, I've said that. But the average golfer gets older.
Yeah,
and he gets older. He gets slower. He gets a little heavier, a little heft around the waist, and the game turns out to be hard. But that doesn't stop. I mean, golf's growing like a weed. It's crazy what's going on in golf.
It's an addiction. I get that, and I'm all for it. But it is, people of limited ability, I'm not sure how much better they can ever get.
That's true. That's true. But people of limited ability still like to hit the ball far.
Yeah.
They still like to hit it far.
They do.
They do. And, if they roll the ball back, that's fine. Relative to their friends, they'll still hit it far.
Yeah. Do you think they're going to have to eventually? I mean, can we agree on that at least?
Well, look, I'm willing to watch what happens. And if it does make the game more compelling, even in a marginal way, I'd say, well, carry on then. Mm-hmm. Carry on.
We should experiment. shouldn't we?
Yeah, carry on.
Let's see if it is better.
Let's see if you roll it back, because at the highest level, the tour players are going to lose 12 yards, maybe even more. Maybe they lose 15. And let's just say it leads to more compelling golf, that Rory has to hit a hybrid or something into 13, and he has to hit a hybrid into 15.
Yeah,
because he's not now. He's going to hit a 5-iron. Or a 6-iron. Yeah. Let's just say it leads to more compelling golf.
Yeah, I mean, that hole's lost a little bit, the decision, that Jones. But ironically, on the other side of the coin, I think that the 18th at Pebble is the perfect example of a hole that is much better now. Because they can reach it in two. It's not just a 100-yard par 3 anymore.
Thank you. I think some holes are better because all of a sudden they've become risk-reward holes where they were 3-shotters before. And there's a few holes that are more, the guys look more ham-handed now, like 10 at Riviera. When I played, almost everybody laid up. 2/3, 3/4 of the players laid up. And then you hit a wedge in there. I birdied that hole a lot. I played it well. And now everybody goes for it, and they get over there, and they're behind the trees, and they chip it over, and they chip it back, and they chip it back. And it's I don't know if it's better or worse, but it's certainly...
I think there's probably things on both sides, but I mean, I bumped into Ian Woosnam the other day and had a chat with him. Now, you'll confirm, one of the great drivers of his generation,
ridiculous.
Top 2 or 3 in the world.
Ridiculous.
And he made himself the best player in the world, or one of the best.
He was the best player in the world.
He took advantage of the fact, he got an advantage from the fact that he was a great driver. He made the point to me that has largely been eliminated today. Rory's let's say Rory's the best driver. He doesn't get the benefit that Woosie got from that talent, because everybody else, the average guy, is so much closer to him. That's the average guy.
I'm sure Rory thinks that too, because Rory's certainly for the rollback of the ball. I'm not sure I 100% agree with that, but I think Rory feels that. And Ian, when Ian was hitting, there weren't 50 people that hit it 9 miles. There were a handful.
Yeah.
When I played the tour, it was Davis Love, Freddie Couples, there was Norman, but Norman wasn't as long as people thought he was.
But the combination of long and straight, that was what he and Woosnam, they had that.
Woosnam had that.
Yeah. He was a beautiful ball.
Nobilo, I didn't ever get to play with Woosnam. I certainly watched him, but Nobilo played a fair bit with him, my former colleague. And Nobilo said he made golf look as simple as anybody he ever saw. As long and as straight, hit it just like an absolute savant.
Yeah, and yet it took him 7 goes to get through the Q school in Europe.
That's crazy.
I've never understood that, and he can't explain it, really.
I didn't know that.
I think it was in his head.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Well, when he made it, he
once he's
ascended all the way to number 1.
Yeah. I mean, but he lost something. He said when they went to Metal Woods. He wasn't nearly as exceptional with the Metal Woods as he was with the Wooden.
They're so forgiving, and he hit it right on the button.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
Inevitably, Brandel, we're going to have to talk about what's going on in the world of golf, pro golf anyway, at the moment. I think anybody who's paid any kind of attention will know that what your views are on that. I'm interested in the fact that compromise is going to have to happen on all sides to make something come out at the end of this. Would you agree with that? And how do you see that going? I mean, you've been very strident in your views.
I hear that side of it.
Yeah.
I don't see any reason, and I don't think it will happen, that there'll be compromise with LIV. I think what happened was it ended the litigation and ended the discovery. And I don't know this to be the case, but I feel like that was the priority in having some negotiation. I think the core golfer in this country would be terribly upset if there was any sort of capitulation towards the Saudis, MBS. I think they'd be terribly upset. 15 of the 19 hijackers were from Saudi Arabia. The Wahhabism that is exported from that country is well known in this country. And what MBS does to his population and does to journalists and does to people who disagree with him is well known to people in this country and well known to the golfing audience. And I think they would be pretty darn upset if golf capitulated. So when you say there has to be something, if
they're all going to come out of this together, there has to be. That's my point.
Look, I think the goal, and I don't know this to be the case, but I think the goal, if the goal were to dilute the MBS and PIF down to some acceptable percentage involvement in the game, the same way it is with Uber. I do take Uber. I'm not sure I would if MBS benefited 100% from it. He's got a 10% share in it. Uber's a wonderful product. I think if they can dilute their interest down to an acceptable level, I think that would be some sort of reasonable.
Yeah, I have to say I don't think there is going to be compromise. And what I'm hearing from behind the scenes, if it's true, the biggest problem in the area of compromise is the PGA Tour.
Well,
they're not for compromising at all, and they're absolutely at stalemate if that's the case.
Well, if that's the case, let's compete. All the Saudis did was buy a moment in time. That's all they've done. Mm-hmm. They've bought players some of them were in peak form, but not many. Their best golf was behind them. They bought names, and they bought names that could be useful for them for their purposes of, in my view, obfuscating their atrocities. They bought a moment in time. These guys don't drop anchor as the best players in the world. They play wonderful golf for 5 years if they're lucky. Extraordinarily lucky, a bit more longer than that. Phil Mickelson, a bit longer. Yeah. He's
Westwood was
he's anomaly. Westwood didn't play extraordinary golf. He played good golf. Very good golf. But extraordinary golf.
He was another terrible chipper, by the way.
He was. But yeah. Somebody who plays that long and doesn't win a major championship wasn't extraordinary.
Yeah.
We use that word too. The same way you take issue with me saying perfect, I take issue with extraordinary.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not the highest level of golf.
I can live with that.
He was a very good golfer.
But where would you put Monty in that then?
Well, Monty led the money list 7 years in a row in Europe. Now, nobody in the history of golf's done that on the PGA Tour, the European Tour, or any other tour. That's extraordinary. That's an extraordinary level of consistency.
Yeah, I always thought my argument with Monty was that if he'd come to America full time before Tiger,
he'd have been amazing.
He would have not only would have won tournaments, he would have won the money list.
Oh, hell,
because his level of performance was extraordinary. That word.
He was.
And his fourth was a bad result for him.
I sat on a set once when he was being inducted into the Hall of Fame, and there was a little pushback from people. He never won a major, and I'm like, look. That guy led the money list 7 years in a row.
And he threw away 2 or 3 majors.
In that era of Woosnam, Seve, Faldo, Langer, come on.
Mind you, a couple of times, no, he didn't win every time. If Tiger had been eligible, he would have won it. Tiger didn't play it. He didn't play enough tournaments.
Tiger's the 500-year flood. Yeah. It's like trying to write against Shakespeare.
I know.
Crying out loud. You can be Chaucer and you come up short.
It's the old thing. People used to start saying, with the exception of Jack Nicklaus, comma.
Exactly. Tiger is in another league, but I have no problem defending Colin Montgomery being in the Hall of Fame.
We've kind of dragged off the subject, but if there's going to be no compromise and there's going to be, as you put it, competition, how would you feel about the PGA Tour on one side of the net, and on the other side of the net there's a largely Saudi-funded tour that is everywhere else except America?
Where do they grow golf? Where are they going to come from? Saudi Arabia?
Yeah.
Do they have an organic path to growth, growing golf in Saudi? I must have missed who won the Saudi Amateur last year. Yeah. Remind me.
Yeah.
Who won the Saudi Girls Junior last year?
I've been there. I was at a tournament there 3-4 years, whatever it was, and there's nobody there watching.
There's nobody there watching. The tour is not just about stars. It's about avenues to building stars through all over the globe. You pick a point. They all want to play the PGA Tour, but there's the Korn Ferry Tour, there's the Latin American Tour, there's the Canadian Tour, there's avenues in China, there's avenues in the Europe. The tour is about building stars.
But I can see that happening if they can't reach any kind of agreement. I think that's what's going to happen.
Well, okay.
There's going to be the PGA Tour, and there's going to be this other thing.
All right. Well, I'd say let's compete.
Yeah.
We have some very smart people who are very wealthy, and they're very much interested in protecting golf, the ecosystem of golf, and making sure that it doesn't get, I would say, debased by ownership that is let's just say, less than palatable. So let's compete.
Yeah.
Would you rather play, players here in the United States? Okay, you want to play here in the United States? You want to play on the best tour in the world, where the most money is, where the best courses are, where the best conditions are, where players are treated the best? Or do you want to fly to all 4 points of the globe, where maybe the golf course is in decent shape, and maybe they treat you right, and maybe there are people out there, maybe there's a buzz, but nobody's going to see it because it's going to be on the air at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning here. It'll be seen there, fine. But I promise you, those players on LIV miss the attention. They miss the buzz. They miss the competition.
Yeah.
And
is there a way back for them?
Yeah, I think there is. I think so. I miss their golf. I miss watching John Rahm. I miss watching Brooks Koepka. I miss.
What would be the pathway for you?
Well, there'd have to be
put
some.
you in charge.
Gosh, there'd have to be some. They'd have to, in my view, they should have come back and not get to play in the signature events. They'd have to earn their way back into the signature events. There'd have to be some sort of either fine or period of time where they're not able to play at the highest level on the PGA Tour. They have to earn their way back, show that they're committed to play these smaller events. You want to come back and play the PGA Tour, you got to go play these smaller events. You got to work your way back. And if you finish within this subset, then you get into the signature events. But you can't get in them for 2 years or a year. Whatever it is, there has to be some penalty for going, because in the process of going, they've hurt the PGA Tour. Our ratings are down for a specific reason. People are tired of hearing about money. Okay, a lot of the best players have left. Okay, some exciting players have left. That hurts the ratings. The tour has spent, I have no doubt, if not $50, $100 million litigating these cases and trying to defend themselves and come up with strategies. That's money that would have gone in the pension fund. That's hurt the tour players. There has to be some quid pro quo for them to come back.
It seems to me one of the biggest hurdles is the Spieths, Cantleys, the guys who didn't go. They're not going to want these guys just walking back in.
Well, they all turned down.
Exactly.
They turned down
lots of money.
50 to 100. I know Will Zalatoris turned down $140 million. Really? He was on the range, injured, and turned down $140 million. Yeah. So if they turn down the money, how can you let those who took the money and damaged the tour come back without some sort of remuneration?
How do you think of, how do you view how Rory's, moved across the map, if you like? And
I don't know exactly. I mean, maybe Rory got tired of fighting the fight.
I think he felt really let
down. And nobody was helping him. He didn't get a lot of support from other players. Rory was the one who took the time to know what he needed to know so that he could speak intelligently on these subjects. He was a reasoned and rational voice, and he didn't get any support. So I thought, I don't know this to be the case, but if I were him, I'd be like, to hell with it. I've done everything I can do.
See, I think there's an argument to be made that the way that the PGA Tour has behaved vis-a-vis the rest of the world over the last 40 years, say, has left space for, there was an opportunity for somebody to do what the Saudis have done. And I would argue that the PGA Tour, had they behaved in a more global thinking way and more responsible way, I would argue too, that this wouldn't have never have happened.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, they've destroyed the Australian Tour, for example. That's always the one I go back to.
Well, they didn't seek to destroy the Australian Tour.
It was a consequence.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to compete on the landscape of professional golf, if you run a golf tournament that can compete in the fall.
The PGA Tour could have gone to Australia for a couple of weeks a year.
The Australian Open should be a major, for crying out loud. For all I don't understand. Like, maybe people hate the idea of 5 majors, but the only reason I'm in favor of 5 majors is because there needs to be another one somewhere on the planet, the Australian Open or the Scottish Open.
You would never have 3 in the one country if you were starting over tomorrow.
No, not if you're starting over, but that's just the way the golf took off in Scotland. It boomed in the U.S. Yeah. We started the PGA of America.
If you're going to have 4, you'd have 2 here.
But if you're in Japan, the Japan Open is a major. Yeah. If you grow up in Australia, the Australian Open is a major. Yeah. If you grow up in Great Britain, the PGA, the BMW PGA is a major.
Yeah, and people all around the world, when they say I'm going to the Open, that means they're open. It's not the Open.
It's so funny how people get on us if we call it the British Open. Yeah. But it's the same people that get on us because we call it the British Open, call it the British Masters. Yeah. So it's like, or the U.S. Masters. Yeah. I mean, they'll call it the U.S. Masters. It's like, I get it. We call it the Open because they want us to call it the Open. And I get it. It was the very first one. Yeah. It's the Open. But if you say the Open over here, people don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Yeah.
They were like, the U.S. Open?
Yeah.
Like
exactly.
So if you say the British Open over here, people know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. But in your ear, you will get an earful from producers saying it's the Open, which of course it is. But if I go out to the random person on the street and say he won the Open, they'll go, I don't know which term you're talking about.
That's my point. It's all over the map. But
yeah.
Anyway, get back to this a little bit. I don't want to dwell on it too much because, my God, it gets talked about enough. But what's your hope for the end result?
My hope is that Liv goes away, and if the Saudis, if there's some agreement with the Saudis, they get October, November, December, or the end of September, October, November, December, and if the tournaments can be held at all corners of the globe.
Are you familiar with what happened in cricket?
No.
The IPL, Indian, all this money came. India's got more money for cricket than anywhere else in the world, and they came along with this. We bought the best players basically, but the establishment compromised enough. The best players now go off and play in the IPL league thing in India. They make all their money, and they come back and they play in the establishment cricket, if you like. That is one way around it in golf. If you gave them, and ironically, I think the one thing about Liv, I've got no time for the shotgun start, the 54 hole, all that nonsense. But the team thing, ironically, is something that if they had a month a year and everybody was playing in these teams, I would like to watch that.
You would. That's interesting. Maybe there's something there.
Because it's different. I'm tired of 72 holes.
It is different, but isn't it compelling?
Well, the Dunhill Cup at St Andrews, back in the day, was great fun.
Because it was played at St Andrews.
Well, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. It took the Ryder Cup, started in 1927? It wasn't even televised here in the U.S. until 1991.
I know.
The
83 we watched it at home.
91 was here, 87 was there. So 87, am I right? 91 was here.
83 at Palm Beach was on television because I watched it.
So 87.
Yeah.
So 85 was there. Is that right?
Yeah, 83 was at West Palm when
so then 85 was in
at the Belfry.
At the Belfry.
Yeah.
And of course Sam Torrance made the putt. Mm-hmm. Okay? Wasn't televised in this country. So and nobody watched. Nobody watched until y'all started beating us, the United States. And so it took from 27 to 91 for there to be any interest. The President's Cup's been going on since 94, and by comparison to the interest in the Ryder Cup, it's minuscule because the international side hasn't beaten
they need to do something
the U.S.
About, yeah.
My point is the NFL started in the 1920s, I believe. Nobody watched the NFL nationally until the Super Bowl in '69. Yeah. It takes time. And by the way, there is national pride at stake in the Ryder Cup, national pride at stake in the President's Cup. Nobody really watches the President's Cup compared to the Ryder Cup, but it took forever. Where's the national pride in these team events? There's none. There's none. And they couldn't be any less compelling. These team events for Liv. They couldn't be any less compelling.
I get it, but my point is if everybody was there and it became, match play.
The potential's there.
Match play's great. I mean, I've always argued that stroke play only becomes interesting when it turns into match play at the end.
Well, look, you're onto something because why else would Rory and Tiger and everybody else be entertaining these team ideas? And maybe they're right. Yeah. Maybe they bring these out.
I don't want any more than a month of
I'm
it.
skeptical.
Maybe even 3 weeks, whatever. But that would be good.
I'm skeptical.
Just to break it up a bit.
Maybe you're right. And if you are, I'll say well done. And the golf's better because of it. I'm just I'm a little reluctant to go there personally.
Yeah. Anyway, we're nearly done. I think I wanted to ask you a bit more about the broadcasting side of your life. And is this week any different from the norm? I mean, are there different rules?
Yeah, there are. The vernacular's different. You can't just say, you certainly couldn't say the backside, which, by the way, doesn't sound good ever.
No.
So back nine even is frowned upon. You say the second nine, the first nine. This is their show, and that's how they want people refer to, the nines are referred to, tournament practice facility instead of the driving range, patrons instead of fans, or even spectators doesn't really work.
Really?
So, if you say those things on the air, it's not like the lights turn off and they shut your mics down, but they'll say in your ear, please, it's the second nine, the first nine, and you spend your whole life saying it one way, and this week you come and you kind of got to say it another. But in general, what makes this week special, and I think you probably feel the same way, is this place. Every shot sort of has historical context. So
great things have happened here. There's no question.
They do, and everybody knows them. And bad things have happened here too, and everybody knows those. And so every shot has great historical context. And so when someone's over a shot on 15, we all well know that Seve hit it in the water there in 1986. We also know that Jack hit a towering iron shot in there in 1986, and that Tigers hit the same shot into 16 where it came down the hill an inch away. So we all know those shots, and it just adds a wonderful element of drama and context to the show.
So is it more fun this week?
My two favorite events to call are the Open and the Masters. There's nothing like the Open. Nothing like the Open. People love golf. The weather's amazing. The courses are unbelievable. The history. For kind of different reasons, though. The Masters for the scenery and the context and the history. They're my two favorite events to call.
Are you playing well enough to qualify for the Senior Open this year?
I may give it a go because it's at Carnoustie. I've never played Carnoustie in my entire life. Mm-hmm. So problem is that I've got a lot of friends coming over, and I'm trying to juggle rounds of golf.
You've done that before. You've qualified.
I've done it twice, and I've made it both times. And believe it or not, and I didn't make the cut either time in the Open, but they still remain highlights to me. I got to play one more golf tournament at St. Andrews, and then I got to play one more tournament at Royal Lytham. The last major I played on tour, the PGA Tour, was the 2001 Open at Royal Lytham. I made the cut and carried on, did okay. And so the last major I played to this point was the Senior Open at Royal Lytham. So there's this sort of bookend connection there. Maybe I'll play again because I'm playing beautiful. My wife and I just played an event. I shot 63 a couple months ago. I hit it farther than I've been hitting it in ages. I played great. So I don't know. Maybe I'll go back out and play a bit.
The very last question is, and I was almost going to start with this question. I wanted Brandel Chamblee, the broadcaster, to analyse Brandel Chamblee, the tour player. What would you have said about him?
I would have said he was a hell of a player, one of the best in the world in college.
Right.
What happened to him? He doesn't hit it as long or as straight. I would have probably dove into the golf swing and said why. But I probably wouldn't have talked about him much because he wasn't on the leaderboard much.
Yeah, well, there you go. Yeah. You've dodged that one nicely.
Yeah, we don't talk about players generally speaking.
No,
that's the difference between calling live golf.
Yeah.
When you call live golf, you have to know something about 150 players. You got to be ready to go. Mm-hmm. When you do my job, we talk about
4 maybe.
Yeah, a night. So over the course of a week, 10, 15. So I wouldn't have talked about him much. And when he popped up on the leaderboard, I'd have probably thought, well, this guy's muddling up the show because he's got no Wikipedia page. I don't know what he's really doing. I don't know his stats. Why is he here? Would he just go away?
Yeah, but I hear he's got a great wife.
I would have said not like his
the show would love that. Yeah. I knew I'd score points with that one. Anyway, Brandel, thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure as always.
It was my pleasure. I've long been a fan of your writing and your attention to detail. So thank you for having me.
I'm just glad we got through this without arguing too much about distance.
Likewise.
Thanks again.
Cheers.
Well, that interview with Brandel wraps up our special series from On the Ground this week. Starting late tonight Australian time, the golf itself will finally take centre stage. But hopefully you've enjoyed these rambling interviews in the build-up to what promises to be another compelling edition of the Masters.